created is in a 1967 Corvette. That happens to be my opinion. But I said, now that's a really attractive dashboard. You know, you like to look at that dashboard. If we can put up a dashboard and design a dashboard that looks like that, believe me, people will go to the dashboard and check it, right? You can go to any website, but if this is the website, you say, let me go. And then I said, with miles per hour, you could put day-to-day infection rate, where the RPM is, you could put the hospitalization rate, and just look at it as gauges. And I explained this to them, and they all looked at me, and they all nodded. And this is the dashboard they gave me. So, you know, I said, all right, you didn't really fully capture what I was trying to say, but I said it nicely. So now we need a new dashboard. So I went back to the same team after this miscommunication last time, and I said, look, I want you to think about a 1968 GTO dashboard, which second to a 1967 Corvette is the second nicest dashboard. I said, now that's a dashboard you like to look at. It's that fake wood grain, tack, spin, and put the numbers in those gauges. Yeah. This is the dashboard they gave me. Okay. So it's not the most artistic or creative, but this is the new dashboard. And this is what people should look at every day. Hospital administrators, elected officials, citizens. The percentage of positive tests per day by region, and then you can look at it by county. This is the number to focus on. How many tests did we do yesterday in the region, and what percent is positive of those tests? So Capital Region, we did 1,889 tests. Just yesterday, 18 people were positive. 1% is roughly what the 18 is. This will tell you on a day-to-day basis if you start to see tremors of a spike. And if those numbers start to move, then you want to know right away why and how. You see the numbers start to move, you go to those 18 people who tested positive in the Capital Region. And the tracing operation then talks to those 18 to try to find out who those 18 were in contact with. Who do you live with? Who do you work with? Where were you? Who did you get infected, possibly? And then you call those people. But tracing can also lead you to a situation that caused the infection. Maybe 5 of those 18 all work in the same place. Oh, now let's go look at that employment center. So this is the new dashboard. This is the new focus. We're all concerned about the same thing. Is there an increase in spikes? And this is going to do it. You can look at it by region and by county. And these are the numbers by county. Westchester County, 2,500 tests yesterday, just yesterday, snapshot, 35, 1.4%. Now, the numbers are relatively small, so day to day you'll see some up and some down. That shouldn't set off any alarm bells, but if you see it's ticking up and it's ticking up for a number of days, then it's something that people have to pay attention to. So we're in a new phase. We're feeling good. We've done great, but we have to stay smart because reopening resets the whole game. When you reopen and people start coming out, in some ways, you go right back to day one. And we know as a fact that reopening has very often caused problems. We know as a fact that reopening other states, we're seeing significant problems. Florida has the highest number of cases yesterday. Wall Street Journal, 12 states that reopened are now seeing spikes. This is a very real possibility. Countries around the globe that reopened are seeing spikes. Just because you reopen does not mean you will have a spike, But if you are not smart, you can have a spike. We need to be as smart and diligent as we were up until today going forward. And my hesitancy is, well, now people think it's okay. Oh, we're reopening. Well, then we're fine. No, we're not fine. We've made great progress, but we have to stay smart. We have to stay disciplined. Last point today, we pray for the family of George Floyd, not just to lose a loved one, but to lose a loved one the way they did. And that video they'll have to watch for the rest of their lives. So we wish them peace as they have their memorial service today. And we will handle these situations, and we will handle these crises, and we will be the better for it because we are New York tough, smart, united, disciplined, and loving. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Dr. Cage. Questions?
Governor, as you know, the city council is now taking up a number of police reform bills. I'm curious if you think, some of them, for example, the chokehold bill is not as comprehensive as the state one. Does the state kind of supersede the council in this case? And what do you make of the inertia of the council? I mean, here we are basically 6 years after Eric Garner's death, and they're just now moving to do a bill regarding a chokehold. Your thoughts on that?
Truth, there's been inertia nationwide. Inertia nationwide. I was in Los Angeles for the Rodney King situation. I was in the federal government. President Clinton sent me to Los Angeles. And Secretary Ron Brown, who passed away since then, God bless his soul, for Rodney King. What has happened since Rodney King? What has happened since Martin Luther King, Dr. King's death? But yes, there's been inertia nationwide. Now, in this moment, Zach, I'm less interested in these knee-jerk political responses of the moment. And you see it all across the country. All of a sudden, politicians are saying, well, I'll do this, I'll move this bottle of water from here to here. That's not the answer either. This has got to be a fundamental rethinking. This is 30, 40 years of police tactics and criminal justice policy that hasn't worked. You go back 30, 40 years, you see that number of institutionalized people going right up. Militarization of the police going right up. Number of police going right up. You know, you can go back to legislation that was passed in the 90s. You can go back to the post-9/11, where police became not just police, but anti-terrorist, an anti-terrorist force, more military equipment, et cetera. This has got to be unpacked, and this has got to be thought through. The state agenda, I feel good about because we've been talking about that for years. You know, I put the Attorney General as a special prosecutor 5 years ago. So our reforms are smart. Our reforms will be in place statewide. You're right. They're over any local city's actions. But this has got to be thoughtful and smart and deep. Don't lose the moment and the opportunity of the moment with cursory public relations reforms. I'm not interested in that, right? You seize the moment, carpe diem, seize the moment, carpe momentum, to make real reform. And that's what I've always done. You, unfortunately, had a closer view than most. After the Sandy Hook massacre, where the nation stood up and said, enough is enough, we passed real gun safety reform. Not a press release. It was real, smart, thoughtful policy. That's what has to be done now. You have to reimagine the police department on a fundamental level. And, you know, how did we get here? The system just evolved. But it doesn't work. And it doesn't work. It's not even a question of who's right, who's wrong. They're both right. Because if it doesn't work for either, it doesn't work. If it doesn't work for both, it doesn't work for either. It's like a relationship, right? It's like any interpersonal relationship. If there's no trust, between the two, it doesn't work. There is no police department that's going to work without the trust of the community. And the community is not going to pay for a police department it doesn't trust. So it has to be resolved on a fundamental, smart, intelligent, non-political basis.
But just to follow up on that quickly, I mean, the answer isn't necessarily defund the police. I mean, it just seems like sometimes we go from one extreme to the other. You know, we fight one extreme with the other extreme, and that's not really the balance you're talking about either.
Well, that's heat of the moment, right? That's heat of the moment. What the protesters are saying is this fundamentally doesn't work, right? This fundamentally doesn't work. The whole relationship doesn't work. It's not just about Mr. Floyd or Mr. Garner. The whole relationship doesn't work. We don't trust. There's no trust. And if there's no trust, there's nothing. The president on the other side, dismissing Mr. Gugino as maybe an Antifa. It was set up. He didn't. The fall was harder than the push. I'm still trying to get my head around that. Disgusting. But, you know, that's heat of the moment. The truth of the moment is you need to rethink and reform this on a very fundamental level.
Governor, I want to ask you about the dashboard, which I think is pretty spiffy. In terms of the testing, what defines a spike? And if you reach a spike, what then can you reasonably expect to close down again?
You know, on these questions, I wish there was a simple answer. I ask the same questions to the best experts globally. I ask, what percentage increase defines a spike? It depends. And I hate that answer, it depends. But that's the answer they will say. It depends. Now, to go back to our example, there was a spike of 18 in Westchester last night. Is that a spike? It depends. It depends on what? It depends on the 18. Let's look at the 18. Can we trace them to one employer, which very often happens, by the way, or one gathering? They all happen to be at the same bar mitzvah. They all happen to be at the same protest. They all happen to work at a meat processing plant. Well, then it's not a spike, it's a hotspot. It's a cluster, which is different than a spike. A spike is a community, widespread community increase. So the it depends means you have to look at the number and where it comes from. If you cannot find a specific cause for that increase and you see it continuing over time, that would be a spike. They won't give you a numerical coefficient, but increasing cases that you cannot explain or resolve, then you have an issue. If you can resolve the increase, it's less of an issue. Well, how could you ever resolve an increase? Because you traced it back to a specific source of infection that you can address. Otherwise, they're looking for a continued community-wide increase that you cannot resolve or explain. Did I give a fair, you want to add something to that?
I'll just say that we also look at the rate of transmission and we follow that every day to see if there are changes.
The RT, right, the rate of transmission, not RT on a dashboard, which would stand for what if you saw RT on a dashboard? Road and track. RT is rate of transmission, which is really the seminal number because that is, if it goes over 1, that's one person is infecting more than one person, right? An RT over 1, which they consider spreading epidemic.
So the Westchester number is 1.4. What if it goes to 3% or 8% or 12%?
That's what they, well, on those extremes, that's a spike. On lesser extremes, they would look within the number to see if they could explain it.
So at what point do you say, we've got a problem, and what do we do then?
What you would hear, you'd hear it incrementally. We would say if the number goes up tomorrow, there's an increase, we have to figure out what it is. If it goes up the next day, then you'd see the eyebrows going up more. And if they could not identify the source of the increase and we couldn't stop it, and we went out and issued additional warnings, admonitions, then you see that go on for 3, 4, 5 days, and the numbers are significant, and you can't stop it and you can't address it, then you have an issue. Then you'd have to start to dial back the valve, right?
That's correct. One thing is, remember, as those total numbers drop, as the governor was saying earlier, a couple of cases, that percentage is going to look higher. And so you got to remember that the overall number is very important as well.
You want to add anything to that? Anything to Mr. Zach's question?
Nope.
Sir?
So all the regions have opened. They've moved very incrementally. They've gone exactly 2 weeks. They've gone phase 1 to phase 2. As you open things up, is your expectation that it could take longer for these regions, particularly here in Mid-Hudson, to get to phase 3? Or do you think it could be 2 weeks?
We're planning on 2 weeks. Why 2 weeks? Because 2 weeks you will know if you have a problem. 2 weeks is, I got infected yesterday, I didn't feel well for a few days. The virus incubated for a few days, then I didn't feel well for a few days, then I stayed home, then I got really sick, then I went to the hospital. You know what is the fallback safety net. You know that hospitalization number. You see that go up. But that could be 2 weeks after you got infected. That's where the 2 weeks came from. One more?
Yeah, just regarding Washington, it seems like there's not going to be any federal action regarding any kind of comprehensive stimulus, at least in the month of June. How long are you willing to wait this out before you think some of these cuts have to go into effect? The city of New York has to deal with their budget on June 30.
I do not believe that even this federal government, with all its dysfunction, will turn its back on state and local governments across this nation at this time. I am that much of an optimist about this federal government, but I believe there is a level below which they won't sink, and I think we are at the bottom of the pond. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.